So we're starting with chapter 7, an overview of corporate governance. All right, the course is business ethics or corporate governance and ethics. We've looked at some aspects of ethics. We're coming to look at this aspect of corporate governance. And the whole idea is to ensure that companies are properly managed. Okay, you're reading MBA management, become management, whatever it is very, very important that you know about corporate governance in order to ensure that these companies that you end up managing are properly managed. So they go together. Ethics is like the moral aspects that you'll be admonished to do that which is right. You'll be counseled, you'll be advised. But the corporate governance aspect has a close relationship with law. Okay, so there are things that are mandated or stated in law as to how companies should be governed. And if you were to breach them, unlike ethics, where there may not be direct consequences, with corporate governance, you could get yourself into big trouble. So it's very, very important for us to understand the concept of corporate governance. As a matter of fact, the new Banking Act requires banks to recruit or get people with corporate governance background. So you cannot be a director of any bank if you have never taken a course in corporate governance, okay? Because the recent banking crisis, it was identified that most of the people who were directors of these banks didn't know anything about corporate governance, all right? Probably they were popular, reputable people that could have some money to invest, and they were brought on the boards of these banks, but they have no idea of how corporations are supposed to be governed. So it's very, very important that you understand this course because it's now a requirement to become a director of banks. Okay, so we'll be looking at the meaning of corporate governance. We'll be looking at the basic principles of corporate governance. We'll look at issues in corporate governance. We'll look at the relevance of corporate governance. We'll look at the mechanisms of corporate governance, and then we'll look at the idea of good governance. Okay, the idea of good governance. So let's begin. It is viewed from a scholarly perspective as a method of addressing the difficulties that come from the separation of ownership and control, i.e. the agency problem. Okay, normally we have to understand corporate governance from the perspective of how companies are formed. You'll have promoters or people that are interested in the formation of company coming together, pooling their resources to set up this company. Okay, but unlike sole proprietorship and partnership, it is required that those that will be responsible for the management of the company will not be the same as the owners, loosely speaking, of the company. So there is separation. Okay, most of the time you have several people coming together to form a company, and you cannot get all of these guys to be part of the management of the company. And so there is a separation between those who formed the company or those who own the company and the managerial team that will be responsible for the management of the company. Okay. And when that separation occurs, the tendency is that because the management were not those who really substantially invested in the company, there is this higher tendency for them to abuse the resources of these companies. And most of the time, I want to use the examples of, say, taxi drivers. If you have ever owned a taxi, you appreciate what I'm talking about. All right. If you see them using your car to pick up loads, overloading the car, all right, you regret ever buying a car. Okay. Sometimes they will use the car, make their money, and by evening they'll call you and tell you that there is a problem with the car. And normally when they call around that time, the assumption is that they didn't work the whole day. Okay, so they'll keep the money that they have worked, and the owner, you now have to spend additional money to fix your car. So what point am I trying to make? Because the taxi drivers don't normally own the taxi, there is the higher tendency for them to waste that asset or to use it anyhow, because they know that when it comes to cost, it will be the owner who has to bear the cost of fixing the car. All right. So that's the idea of agency problem. If you own somebody, if you own a shop and somebody is selling for you, you will face this problem as well. Okay. There is the tendency of the agent or the salesperson stealing from your sales and so on and so forth. So the whole idea of corporate governance came in order to deal with this problem of agency. Okay. Once the principal in the context of companies, the shareholders will not be necessarily be the management of the company, then they need management to act as their agent to act on their behalf. Okay. And so when that happens, you must have systems and structures in place to make sure that the scenario that I just explained will not occur. Okay, you need to have structures in place to ensure that that taxi driver will not squander or waste your taxi and its resources or the things that come from there. You want to make sure that the salesperson will not waste the money that will come as a result of the patronage that might occur at your shop. All right. So at a macro level, that is the idea behind corporate governance. Okay. So corporate governance refers to action taken by organizations to improve relationships and interactions with various stakeholders. So at a higher level as well, you want to make sure that the interests of various stakeholders are catered for. Okay, so much later I'll be looking at these stakeholders, but we have employees, we have the shareholders themselves, we have management, okay, having diverse interests most times. So you need to have systems in place to make sure that these interests by these various stakeholders, including the community, are well catered for. Okay, that is the idea behind corporate governance. It is concerned with the method in which owners or lenders to firms ensure that they will receive a return on their investment. So I just explained that. Without the right structures, management, which in our context we are referring to as agents, will have the temptation to waste the resources and the investments of the owners or the lenders of the business. So you want to avoid that. Okay, therefore, corporate governance refers to a system of rules, regulations, and practices for making corporate decisions. So as management team, you will not just be making decisions based on how you feel like it, okay? But there are rules, there are regulations, and there are practices that will guide the decisions that you'll be making. That is why I said in the intro, whilst the ethics aspect is just to admonish you and to improve, say, your ethical behavior or morality, when it comes to corporate governance, it has a close relationship with law, all right? And with law, there are enforcement regimes to make sure that you do that which is right. If you don't, you face the consequences for that, all right? So it's systems of rules, regulations, and practices for making corporate decisions. So let's look at other definitions. So corporate governance is to conduct the business in accordance with the owners or shareholders' desire, which generally would be to make as much money as possible while confronting the basic rules of society embodied in law and local customs. Okay, so corporate governance does not neglect the need to make money for shareholders. In fact, that is why they invested and formed the companies in the first place. But whilst Milton is saying is that you need to do so by obeying the basic rules of society embodied in law and local customs. Okay, so in your bid to make money for your shareholders, that is okay because they started the company in the first place because they wanted to make money, but it shouldn't be done at the expense of the rules and laws and regulations and local customs of wherever you're operating. Okay. In terms of public policy, corporate governance is the process of ensuring a company's survival, expansion, and growth, whilst also holding it accountable for the use of its power and ability to manage other businesses. So within the context of public policy, we need corporate governance because we need companies to survive. Because largely the public or government sector can only employ as much. Okay, in very developed economies, when it comes to employment, it comes from the private sector, it comes from companies. So it is very, very important to have good corporate governance structures in order to ensure that companies survive, they expand, and they grow. But just as this one, we want to ensure it by holding companies accountable for the use of its power and the ability to manage other businesses. So the other businesses here are the other stakeholders that we have found in the earlier explanation of corporate governance. Okay. So managing other businesses, we say we have other stakeholders. And within the context of public policy, other businesses will be the community or the society and the minority groups that companies must address their needs in the quest of their bid to survive, to expand, and to grow. Okay, so that is the idea of corporate governance. In pure business sense, defined by Milton, it is meant to grow wealth for shareholders. Okay, in the context of public businesses, public policy, it is about the interests of not just the shareholders, but the other stakeholders of the company. But in both cases, in all of this definition, it should be done within the laws and rules of society. Okay, you must be held accountable because you are supposed to obey certain laws and certain regulations. All right. Okay, any questions so far with the intro and definition of corporate governance?
Prof,
Yep.
please kindly go over the other businesses.
So
last point
the
you made.
last one, yes. So I said this other businesses doesn't necessarily mean other companies. Okay. So it could have been, say, manage other stakeholders. That is the idea of the other businesses here. So yes, we know you have to grow, you have to expand, and so you have to survive, but I want to hold you accountable for the use of your power and the ability to manage other businesses. There are other stakeholders that you have to take into account. Okay. So I said, because it's public policy, the emphasis of these other businesses will be, say, the society or the community within which you are operating. In your bid to be profitable, to grow and expand, are you abusing the resources? Are you creating pollution? Okay. Are you able to manage these things such that you won't create any pollution? And also, minority groups, even within the company, you have minority shareholders. Are you treating them fairly? All right. So beside making money, you have to be interested in other businesses, and other businesses is basically other stakeholders whose interest you must cater for in your bid to make more money. Are we fine? Are you okay?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
All right. So we have some basic principles of corporate governance. So if you are a company and you claim to be operating in accordance with the requirements of corporate governance, these principles must stay with your company. So there should be principle of fairness. All right. So treat all shareholders fairly, including minority and foreign shareholders, as well as other stakeholders like employees, the local community, and customers. So this first principle helps in explaining the other business that I was trying to talk about. All right. So it's coming from the principle of fairness. All right. We know that you want to make profit for your shareholders, but in doing that, treat all shareholders fairly. All right. Do you own shares? Anybody with idea of shares? So when it comes to share ownership, you normally have what is known as majority shareholders, and we will have minority shareholders. In some contexts, you may have local and foreign shareholders. Okay, the majority shareholders most of the time tend to have their say, their way. All right, in parliament, they would say the minority has their say and the minority will have their way. So majority shareholders will normally have their way in most decisions, even when those decisions could affect the minority group. For example, if you pick, say, institutional shareholders, most of the time they buy shares in bulk, huge amounts of shares. And they are mostly not, for example, interested in the payment of dividends. What they want is for the companies to grow and expand so that the share value of the company will actually go up, okay, instead of being paid dividends. But if you pick the individual investors like you and I, if we choose to buy shares, most of the time they may be interested in the payment of dividends. Okay, so when the debate and the vote comes to either to pay dividends or not to pay dividends, once it's based on votes, the institutional shareholders that hold majority shares are likely to win the day as far as deciding that they don't want dividends paid comes to fall. All right, I hope that is clear. So this is just an example. There are many other decisions like that where minority interests are likely to be affected, okay, if there is no principle of fairness, right? Are we following what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
Yes,
Prof.
Prof.
Yes, so there should be fairness. So recently, I think MTN paid interim dividends. I don't know whether any of you own shares in MTN. And they had two options. You could get your cash, you could be paid cash, or you could be given what is known as script dividends, right? Script something where instead of you being paid cash, your amount of dividends that should have been paid to you will be converted to shares, so that the money that should have been paid to you, they will use that to buy more shares for you, so that you can own more shares of the company. Okay, so that is the principle of fairness. Because for minor individuals, most of the time, they want dividends. They want to use that to buy food and or pay electricity bills and so on and so forth. But majority shareholders really, and institutional shareholders don't normally care about this. So based on the principle of fairness, make sure you treat all your shareholders or stakeholders well, all right? Foreign shareholders, because they are not probably indigenous, you may want to cheat them, you may want to take decisions that won't favor them. No, the principle of fairness seeks to prevent all that. Okay, so you need to treat all your stakeholders, employees, the local community, customers fairly. Okay. Another underpinning principle of corporate governance is transparency. And these are the heart of corporate governance. If you are not transparent as a company, then you are not following the tenets of corporate governance. Okay, so this means openness and a desire to give shareholders and other stakeholders comprehensive information about all elements of how business is conducted. Okay, so if you follow corporate governance tenets, there wouldn't be any reason why you want to hide information from other stakeholders. Once you want to operate in an opaque environment or context, what it means is that you have something to hide. Okay, so one of the basic principles of corporate governance is transparency. All your financial statements must be available, either to auditors or to regulatory authorities. There must be transparency, okay? And from time to time, you need to get board's approval in important decisions. So as management, you don't just decide to do anything. When the rules require that, you need board's approval for that particular activity, So you need to operate transparently when you're operating based on the principles of corporate governance. Very close to that is the principle of accountability, the obligation and responsibility to explain or justify the company's activities and behavior, right? So if you make any decision and there is a problem, even if there is not a problem, you need to come and explain the reasons why those decisions had to be made. Okay, sometimes between management and board, later we'll talk about board issues, right? But let me just explain it. Part of the structures that corporate governance will use to ensure that the agents here, management, will not abuse the principal, i.e. shareholders, is to have a third body to regulate the activities of management. And that third arm is what is known as the board of directors. Okay, so the board of directors are there to ensure that management will be doing things that will be in the interest of shareholders and other stakeholders of the company. So if you are part of management, you need to hold yourself accountable by explaining some of the decisions that you make to either board of directors, or certain times the whole board must explain to shareholders during annual general meetings. Okay, so the principle of accountability is very key in corporate governance. Then we have fiduciary principle. Fiduciary principle, the directors, who are the agents of the shareholders who invested money and own the organization, must act with trust while carrying out their tasks. So I just explained to you these directors because the shareholders will not be in charge in the day-to-day management of the company. The shareholders, through the AGM, will normally appoint some people as directors. Okay, so they have given their trust to you. I will not be here, but I know I can't trust management that much. So I'm putting that responsibility on you as directors to make sure that management is doing that which is required. Okay, so it will be a serious breach of fiduciary duty if the directors then go and reach some form of agreement with management in order to waste the resources of the shareholders of the company. Okay, and as you might see in the case studies in the book, there have been several instances like that, where directors in history, where directors just looks somewhere, okay, knowing very well that what is going on is not right. In fact, they go into partnership or agreement of management to abuse the resources of the company. That is an abuse of the fiduciary principle of corporate governance, all right? So you are an agent, you are acting on behalf of shareholders, and you must ensure, right, that you keep that trust and make sure that management is working in the best interest of the company or shareholders. Okay, reliability. So the rest of the points are very, very similar to the need to be accountable, the need to hold your fiduciary duty high, and so on and so forth. So reliability focuses on honoring the words and the commitment of the directors to all stakeholders. All right, so directors, if you cannot do the work with integrity, it's best not to accept it, because the shareholders, as I've explained, and largely all stakeholders are looking up to you. All right, the reason why you are appointed and given all this, the huge allowances, depend upon the size of the company, although is because we feel that you can be trusted. We can trust you to hold management accountable, to make sure that management is doing the right thing. All right. So as a director, you need to be reliable. You need to keep and honor your words and commitment to all stakeholders of the company. Okay. Then we have the principle of dignity, to respect all stakeholders' rights and privileges. So this is very similar to fairness. When we're talking about the fairness issue, I explained this minority and majority shareholders dichotomy. Okay, so you need to treat and respect stakeholders' rights and privileges, whether they are minority shareholders or foreign shareholders. Then we have the principle of propriety. Because shareholders are the ultimate owners of corporate property, corporate governance places a premium on protecting the interests of shareholders. Okay, so if you are management, you are just an agent. The assets of the company do not belong to you. Okay, so those of you that like using the property of companies for your private businesses, that is not right. All right, so you need to know that the assets of the company actually belong to the shareholders of the company. In fact, in law, if you have done business law before, you even know that the assets do not, in the context of law, do not belong to the shareholders, because the company has a distinct personality from the shareholders of the company. Okay, but loosely speaking, we can say that they belong to the shareholders, but not management of the company. Most of the time, management will be those guys using the assets, be it cars, be it whatever it is, but you have to know that the ownership belongs to shareholders and not management of the company. Okay. Then responsiveness, to respond to societal requirements in an efficient and effective manner. So part of corporate governance also is to be socially responsible, not just to think about making more money for your shareholders, but you need to be thinking about the society and other stakeholders in general. Okay. Are we clear with these principles? Any questions?
Yes, sir.
We have principle of fairness, we have transparency, we have accountability, we have fiduciary, we have reliability, we have dignity, we have propriety, and we have responsiveness. Okay, so these are basic principles. Once a company wants to operate based on the principles of corporate governance, these things must be present. Okay. Then we have OECD corporate governance requirements. So OECD stands for the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Okay, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It consists of 37 countries or democracies, countries that practice in democracies, and they believe in market-based economy. So there are countries where once it's democracy, it's not government that determines the kind of goods and services and determine prices. No, they believe in market-based economies. And so they come together to develop policy standards to promote sustainable economic growth. All right. So the countries, just like ECOWAS in West Africa. All right. This is like a global association, economic body that is there to ensure that there is sustainable economic growth. And the only way, so they are very, very heavy on corporate governance, because the only way to ensure sustainable, or one of the best ways to ensure sustainable economic growth, is to abide by the tenets or the requirements of corporate governance. Okay. So they have the requirement, corporate governance requirements, to be the rights of stakeholders. So protect the rights of all stakeholders of the company, not just shareholders, but there are other stakeholders that we just looked at. All right, we have employees, we have customers, we have the community within which you are operating, we have government. And so part of the requirement, if you claim to be abiding by corporate governance, is to respect the rights of stakeholders. Okay, next point. So they are very, very close to the principles, the basic principles of corporate governance. So the next one is equitable treatment of shareholders. Okay, whether they are minority, majority, I've explained them already, foreign shareholders, local shareholders, or domestic shareholders, they should be treated equitably. Then we have role of stakeholders in corporate governance. So the OECD bodies promote the idea that you need to involve other stakeholders in the management of your organization. All right. So stakeholders shouldn't just be idle. and wait for companies to get into trouble before they react. So, for example, if you're an employee of a company, and the company, for example, is continually defaults in the payment of taxes, okay? Yes, you need to find a way to correct that, okay? Why? Because if you keep shut and one day the regulatory bodies come and shut up or close down the company, it is you that will be found wanting. You'll be in trouble because you'll be losing your job, okay? So part of corporate governance is to allow stakeholders to find a way to influence how companies are managed. If you pick it from the perspective of customers, if you are not managing the company well and it's reflective of the quality of products and services that you sell, they can choose not to buy from you and rather buy from your rivals. Okay, so it's a signal or a message to you that the company is not being governed well. So the OECD seeks to promote the involvement of other stakeholders in corporate governance, okay? Just as the basic principles, they highlight the need for disclosure and transparency. Then finally, they actively support or promote the responsibility of board in corporate governance. Okay, at the heart of corporate governance is what board of directors are supposed to be doing, because they are supposed to be like the watchmen and women to make sure that management of companies do what is required of them. So OECD guidelines and requirements require that the board plays very active role when it comes to the management of companies. Okay. Are we fine with this? The requirements? Are we okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Because it's online, I'll always need your feedback before I proceed so that I won't just be rushing through. So let's look at issues in corporate governance. So the first issue is distinguishing the roles of board and management. And I think I've explained that to you. So these guys are responsible for the day-to-day management of the company. This body here is supposed to be like the watchman, okay, or to supervise, to regulate the activities of management, okay? So it's very, very important that these guys are independent of these people. If these people can influence these people, then stakeholders and shareholders of the company are in trouble, because what they have to do is to supervise the activities of these people and make sure that management is doing that which is right. All right. So once they compromise this role, then the whole fabric and structure of corporate governance will be in trouble. Okay. So that is an important issue in corporate governance. Right. Then we have the composition of the board and related issues. I said at the heart of corporate governance is the board of directors and what they do. So the composition of board is a major issue in corporate governance in terms of the mix of qualifications that people must have in order to be part of the board. Okay. The gender issues, how many male, how many female should be on the boards, and so on and so forth. But the most important is what I just said, the qualifications that people must have. And I just told you much earlier that the new Banking Act requires that people have knowledge in corporate governance before they can be appointed onto the boards of companies. Okay. So it is not because you are probably a popular person and that's what happens, or you're a politician and things like that. No, there is a room for that, but you need to make sure that whether you're a politician or popular, you are somebody who is knowledgeable in the management of business. You have some functional knowledge as far as how businesses are supposed to be managed are concerned. So the composition in terms of the knowledge, the expertise, the years of experience are very, very important when it comes to the composition of boards. All right. As I also indicated, what percentage should be male, female, because also research is heavy now on gender issues as far as board compositions are concerned. So it's an important issue in corporate governance. Okay. Another thorny issue is the separation of the role of the CEO and the chairperson, right? I told you that these guys' board are supposed to supervise these guys, the management. But what is in practice is that most of the time, the CEO, who is supposed to be this part of management, then it becomes the chairperson of the board. Okay? And it's becoming a thorny issue because then the independence that we want these people to have may not be there because the CEO is already part of management and he has the tendency to influence the activities of the board of directors. So it's a big issue. Okay? But if you also separate it, sometimes some of these people, the chairpersons, will also now want to show the CEO where power lies. And that can also create some confusion within the organization. Okay. Recently, there was this case. It's not directly board CEO and chairperson, but it shows the tension that can actually occur in the management of companies or organizations. Okay, I think Minister of Energy, right? And I think, is it the chairman or previous chair of the NPP? What's his name? Guys, you should be helping me. MBA, you guys should know everything. Not John Boydu. There is this, the older man. This is John Boydu. John Boydu is secretary.
Freddie Blay.
Freddie Blay. Good. Did you guys follow that particular case? Okay, where the minister didn't want some deal with a South African company. I think it's about an oil deal. Okay. And Freddie Blay had gone ahead to sign some contract. Hey, you guys, are you in Ghana? Do you remember that story? Or it's none of your business? Okay. So the point I want to register here was the tension that occurred. I think Freddie Blay was the chair of something, and the minister too was saying that no, he finds that deal to be suspicious, so Ghana should not get into it. Meanwhile, Freddie Blay, who was the chair, was already negotiating with the South African company. Is Ghana's percentage in some oil field, and the fact that they wanted to sell it to a South African company or that something of that sort. Okay, so if you separate them as well. So when the CEO is also the chairperson, it has its own advantages, okay? But the disadvantage is that then the independence that is expected of this guy could be influenced. But if you separate them two, there could be tension, especially so when this chairperson wants to show that he's superior to the CEO. They could create confusion, okay? So that is another issue in corporate governance. Most of the write-ups and research is going for the fact that there should be separation, okay? The CEO should not also be the chairperson of the board. That is what the research is pointing towards. But because of the practical realities and so on and so forth, some countries, I think including Ghana, still have the CEOs being the chairpersons of boards, okay? But that is another important issue in corporate governance. All right. Then the other issue, so the issues are like the tension fields or areas in corporate governance. All right. That is the meaning of issues in corporate governance. So the other issue is, should the board have committees? Okay. So board of directors or boards normally operate like parliament. Are you familiar with the works of parliament? Anybody familiar with parliament? And here I'm talking about the various committees that parliament has. Okay, anybody to mention some of them for me? The committees in parliament. Hey.
I think they have one for finance.
So we have finance committee. We have what again?
The security committee.
Security
Committee. Security committee.
What again? Yeah.
We have the budget committee.
Budget committee.
Committee.
Okay, we have a budget. We have a committee in charge of budgets.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So you realize that most of who is speaking there, your line is breaking. So you realize that for most of the ministries, it's almost like we have a committee for almost all the ministries, right? And the reason why it's okay. Your line is not too clear, so that's fine. So the reason why Parliament will normally have these committees is to ensure efficient scrutiny of documents and for them generally to do their work well, all right? Because if you want to initiate and finish everything on the floor of Parliament, they cannot do much. That is why they use the committee system in order to ensure that things are done very well, okay? So the same idea when it comes to boards. The board normal, that's why the composition is very, very important. The board should be made up of people with expertise in various key areas of business, okay? So that when there is an issue, that committee will be in charge of going through and making all the necessary knowledgeable recommendations as far as that area of the business is concerned, all right? So the only issue is whether board should have committees. When you have the committees too, it may lead to some delays. Okay, so there are arguments about why board may need committees and why board may not need committees and so on and so forth. So if you form the board, you then have committees for various areas: nomination, remuneration, auditing, risk management. Some will argue that it will lead to more efficient work as far as the operations of the board is concerned. Some will see it as probably a waste of money, a waste of time, and so on and so forth. So this is another issue in corporate governance as to whether boards should be operating with committees. But as it stands now, that is the case, okay? As far as the English Commonwealth countries are concerned, you have boards operating with committees, and the committees will normally be responsible for areas such as nomination, remuneration, auditing, and risk management. Okay. Then the other issue in corporate governance is the appointment to the board and directors re-election. Do shareholders in reality appoint directors, or they merely ratify the decisions of the board? Okay, so if you own shares of a company, normally when it comes to the appointment of directors, okay, what happens is that they will normally send you a note or a letter or whatever indicating the directors that will be appointed. Yours is to go and vote whether yes or no. Okay, so the question is it really shareholders that determines this? Okay, so they will appoint them and come to annual general meeting just to ratify. Okay, if they have more yes, then the names that they have suggested stay. All right. Then if it is no, they go back and reappoint, say, new names. So the question is it really the shareholders, or it is the management and the existing board that really appoint directors? Okay. When I was explaining the concept of corporate governance, I told you that because the shareholders, who are the owners of the company, cannot actually be in charge of the day-to-day operations, they appoint directors to act on their behalf. Okay, but in practice, they don't get to do the appointment. It is the management and the existing board. If there is no board, the management will come with the name initially and shareholders will ratify. Okay, so that is another area of contention, whether in reality it is the shareholders that get to appoint directors. Okay. Then we have these other issues. I think we have to run quickly. Directors and executive remuneration. So it's a big issue. All right. So for some companies, it's huge. The amount of money that executives take and the amount that directors take is very, very huge. And so it's becoming an issue. More so, normally it's the role of directors to determine the remuneration of executives. All right. So they have to determine the top management team of the organization. They actually have to determine how much these guys will be paid. The executives then will be those that will suggest the amount of money directors should be taking as allowance and what do you call it? Honorarium and so on and so forth. Okay, maybe subject to the approval of shareholders or ratification of shareholders at annual general meetings. All right, so it's a thorny issue, especially so when companies are not doing well. All right, so we have cases where companies have actually recorded losses, and yet executives of the company were still insisting on being paid bonuses and huge amounts of perks. So the determination of directors and executive remuneration has always been a big issue in corporate governance. How much is fair? Okay, salary to these guys or compensation to these guys. Most of the time, you have to compare probably to what other CEOs are being paid and so on and so forth. So it's always a big issue as to whether they are being paid fairly or not. And fairly here is whether they are worth the huge amount of money they take every month and sometimes every year. Okay. Then disclosure and audit. Board of directors has a duty to provide shareholders with an accurate and fair view of financial position through audited financial statements. I think we've explained this. So disclosure and audit is big. It's a big issue in corporate governance. Protection of shareholders' rights and their expectations, it has come again. It's another issue in corporate governance. Dialogue with institutional shareholders. All right. So the normal thing is that until annual general meeting, shareholders do not normally have an active role to play in the management of the company. Okay. But the Cadbury Committee, when the scandals occur, okay, in UK, a committee was set up, and part of the advice of the committee is that institutional shareholders should stay in touch with companies in order to regulate or monitor how things are being done. Okay, so institutional shareholders, I explained to you that these are shareholders that buy huge blocks of the shares of a company. For example, in Ghana, we have SNIT. Okay, SNIT normally, if it is not number one, it will be among top 5. If it chooses to buy the shares of any company, it's likely to be among the first top 5 or number 1 shareholder of the company, because really it is not an individual that is buying. It's the pension contribution of pensioners that they use. So they are huge institutional investors. And the advice is that now, even though in time past they were not supposed to be interfere with the management, the committee feels that the institutional stakeholders now must stay in touch with companies on a regular and systematic basis to see at first hand or quickly instances where these companies may be abusing the resources of the company. And the reason is that they have money to lose. They have made huge investments, so they can't just go to sleep like any other ordinary shareholder. Okay. Right. Then should investors have a say in making a company socially responsible corporate citizen? So that is another area. All right. We said as part of corporate governance, you must cater for the interest of the society and other stakeholders. But the question is, should investors have a say? Because in reality, it's their money that is going to be dissipated in the name of corporate social responsibility. Okay. Should they have a say when it comes to investing in corporate social responsibility? Okay. Portia, I can see you.
Yes,
Oh,
sir.
yes, please.
Sir, please, from what you are saying, you mean
Yeah.
let's say for instance the bank,
Mm-hmm.
the chairperson should the board should report to the chairperson, and then this board too will report to management, and then the management to employees. So
The
my
board
question
should
is,
report to. No, explain it well.
I mean, you said that
Mm-hmm.
let's take for instance the bank,
Yes.
the chairperson should interact with the board,
The
right? And then the
chairperson
board
should.
should
No.
interact.
Get the connection. So the shareholders, they own the bank in your example, right? But in the ordinary course of things, the shareholders of the bank will not be in charge of the management of the bank. So
Yes.
they need to appoint some people known as board of directors. Okay. And the board of directors are those who will then appoint the management of the bank and also supervise the activities of the management of the bank to ensure that they work in the interests of the shareholders of the bank. Are you clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So
So
my
where does your
question,
question come? Yes.
so should this chairperson interact or should she interfere with the day-to-day activities of the company? Let's say for instance for a bank.
Are you interested in the chairperson analysis? So when you have the board, we'll come to, I think lecture 9 will be about board of directors. Okay, but let me just explain since you're talking about the chairperson. So once you now have the board, Linda, I've seen your hand. I'll call you. If you have the board must have a chair, just like parliament, the committees have their chair, right? So the board must have somebody that will chair the board. And the board normally will have what is known as executive and non-executive directors. The executive directors tends to be part of the top management of the company. Okay, so for example, if you are the CEO of the company, you are the part of the, like the head of the management team, but automatically that also makes you part of the board of the company. Why? Because when it comes to providing information, the board members will want to know from the CEO what is happening. Okay. So there are key positions in the company that automatically will make you part of the board of the company, but they are known as executive directors. So when we have, say, about 10 people, and we have other board members that are not part of the executive, okay, so they are known as non-executive directors. So when you have, say, 5 executives who I said are also part of the management, and we have, say, 5 non-executives who are not part of the management, making 10, they must decide who will chair when that board meets, who will be chairing the meeting, okay? And that is where most of the time, the chair of that board is left to the CEO of the company, who is part of the management of the company to chair the board in terms of leading the discussions when they go for board meetings. Are you clear, Portia?
Yes, sir. Thank you
Good.
very
Then
much.
you can now ask your question.
So I mean that let's say for instance the chairperson tries to ignore this board and then management and then interfere with the day-to-day activities of the company.
What
For
do you mean
her
by
own use,
interfere? Like you being the CEO and
trying
you
to
wasting the
control.
resources?
Yes.
No, straight away, corporate governance is about law, right? So the board must take you on. Okay, the board, when it gets to AGM, annual general meeting, the board should be able to take you on. In fact, report you to shareholders. There can be lawsuits against the CEO and so on and so forth. Okay, that is why you need a strong board to make sure that the CEO, the fact that you are CEO doesn't mean you can just be wasting the resources of the company. Okay, the board must fire you. And if it leads to a bothersome fraud, they should be able to sue you on behalf of the company.
Okay.
Yes, so you don't have the right to just waste and steal the resources of the company. If they don't know, The board members do not know. That's different. If they're in collusion with you, that is another different thing. All right. But you don't have the right to just waste the resources of the company because you are the CEO. Linda?
Okay.
Prof, please, do we have a healthy situation when the board members own the larger part of the shares of a company? And with that too, will the principle of fairness be effective here?
Okay. So that the logic behind having some of the board members or board of directors being shareholders is just based on the idea that we want to breach the agency problem that I discussed from the beginning. So the assumption is that if I am not the owner of the company, there's the higher tendency for me to waste the resources. Okay, if you reverse the argument, then the argument is that if the owners are now actively involved in the management of the company by way of being board members or directors, then they will not sit down, so to speak, for the management to waste their resources. Okay, so in theory, that is the reason why. So for some companies, if you own a certain percentage of shares of the company, you automatically become part of the board of the company, like the institutional shareholders that I spoke about. So Senate like this will have the opportunity to always appoint somebody to sit on the board, to be a board member of most of the companies that they invest in. Okay, so if you are, say, from Senate, you will not sit idly for the CEO and the management of a company you have invested in to waste their resources. Because you know that once they waste their resources, the company can collapse and the investments of pensioners can go to waste. Okay, so in theory, that is the reason why some of the directors of the company must have shares, okay, in the company. Linda, are you clear?
So partially, I was linking it to the principle of fairness.
Yeah. So then let me understand you.
Say when they are supposed to share some allowances or something is there for them for it to be shared among the shareholders. They holding a larger chunk of the shares, they might consider taking everything and leaving the minority shareholders.
No. For example, once dividends is declared for a particular year, it is by law required that all shareholders be paid. Okay. And you cannot, unless in some jurisdictions we have shares in classes. We have class A shares and class B shares and so on and so forth. Okay, but in most jurisdictions, we just have ordinary shares for everybody. And so if it is 1 Ghana cedi per share, it will be multiplied by the number of shares that you hold. So they cannot actually influence that decision in their favor against the minority shareholders. Okay. In the occasions where the unfairness comes to play is what I explained. For example, the rep from SNET that will be on the board or the institutional shareholders, most of the time they are being paid salaries, right? Like they only take, and they also get some allowances for being on the board when they go for meetings and so on and so forth. So the incentive really to get money is not like to be paid additional money by way of dividends. It's not something that most of the institutional shareholders are interested in. What they actually want is for the value of the company, valuation of the company to grow. Okay, when the valuation or the company grows in value, it leads to corresponding increase in the valuation of the share prices. The share price of the company will go up. And so they are more interested in what is known as capital appreciation. Okay, but minority shareholders, in this case, individual shareholders, mostly invest because they want dividends. All right. At the end of the year, they expect that they will be paid something so that they can use it to check, address their personal issues. Okay. So that was what I was using as an example. But the majority shareholders cannot go and negotiate for a higher dividends for themselves at the expense of minority shareholders. No, that is not required by law. Linda, are you clear?
Yes, Prof. So,
Yes.
Prof, who does supervise the work of the board?
No, so that is why the board is, you need to get people with integrity on the board. Apart from most of the time, AGM, as in members at annual general meeting, they are those who can scrutinize the activities of the entire company, including the board. Okay, but don't forget, when it gets to AGM, most of the shareholders might not have any expertise at all as to how companies should be managed. In fact, most AGMs, most shareholders wouldn't even go. Okay, you could be anywhere in Ghana and hold the shares of, say, MTN, and the meeting is being held at Accra. Most of these minority shareholders, the amount of shares they own cannot even foot their transport fare. Okay, so in theory, the annual general meeting of shareholders should have been the body responsible for scrutinizing the operations of the company, including those of board of directors. Okay, but it is not effectively done at that particular forum. So the key thing is to get then board members with integrity that can actually supervise the activities of the company work. If they fail at that, most of the time it is normally some of the institutional shareholders. And of course, we have individual shareholders that are very astute in business, and they normally can take the directors on. They can sue the directors of the company in case there is any fraudulent activities taking place. Okay. Linda, are you clear?
Yes, Prof. Thank you.
Okay. So if you have your book now, you can go to the cases. Okay. We have several cases on corporate governance at the end of the book, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Several abuses have occurred in time past, and many directors and management of companies have gotten into trouble because they wanted to steal from companies. Okay. Any other question? I like the interaction because then it tells me you guys are following. When the place is just quiet, I'm not too sure whether I'm making my point. Any other question? Are we fine? Okay,
Yes,
Boatin.
Prof.
Boatin, your hand is up.
Please, yes, Prof.
Yeah.
Please, I just want to add to what my sister was asking. In some jurisdiction or institution too, the activities of the board is also supervised by external auditors when they come for audit.
Oh yeah, you are off, but you are right. All right. So one of the instruments of corporate governance really are the auditors. So they will come and check the books, all right, of the company, and then they may be able to find out if the shareholder or whatever, the management as well as the directors. In fact, most of the time they will come and reveal any wrongdoings of the company. Okay, so auditors play a key role when it comes to corporate governance. Linda, are you following? I think Eric is gone, but
Yes, Prof.
okay. So yes, I forgot about the role of auditors, but they are principal. They will then come and investigate or audit the books. And if there are any most of the time they will bring to light any wrongdoings by either the management of the company or the board of directors of the company. Okay. We'll come to the mechanisms. Yes, we'll get to the mechanisms of corporate governance. Yes.
Please, in the situation of these financial institutions which were closed down by the Bank of Ghana, they had board of directors, they had external auditors coming around, yet they were not complying to the laws. So in this case, how do you term this?
Yes, so I just told you to read the cases. You get to know from history the collusion that can occur between management, board of directors, and sometimes auditors of the company as well. I mean, the external auditors, okay, where they will come and look somewhere. All the big auditing firms, if you check, they have all manner of scandals against them as far as corporate governance is concerned, okay? So there are cases where things have not been done well, but auditors will come and give a clean report or opinion about the company, that everything is fine, and so on and so forth. So it occurs in reality, where auditors will come and see that there is some form of window dressing or wrong things are going on, and yet they will choose to look elsewhere. Are we fine? Even with these cleanup cases, the Bank of Ghana itself had the regulatory staff that needed to go out there to be monitoring how banks are being operated, but they also failed in that particular aspect in their duties. Are we okay?
Yes, Prof.
Okay. Let's move to the relevance of corporate governance then. So corporate governance primarily focuses on managing corporations well. That is the whole idea. We want to ensure that companies are being managed well. So from the perspective of management, even though you don't own the company or you didn't invest much in the company, we need to put in place structures that will ensure that you give off your best. Okay, corporate governance is necessary because management typically has an information edge over other stakeholders. So because the management are in charge of the day-to-day activities, they tend to know more. All right. And if we don't have corporate governance systems in place, they can then take advantage of the other stakeholders of the company. Better corporate governance is related to better company performance. All things being equal, it will not allow management to abuse the resources of the company. And that could lead to better company performance. Okay. When investors are assessing companies for potential investments, the majority of them believe that governance standards are at least as significant as financial performance. So basically what that point is trying to say is that if you operate if you follow good corporate governance standards and requirements, you have a higher chance of getting investors investing in your company than companies that do not go operate in accordance with corporate governance, okay? Because investors will look at your governance standards as well as the financial performance of the company before they decide to invest in that particular company, okay? So benefits of corporate governance to the society, and we've just touched on some of that based on our discussion so far. So adapting to rules for transparency in dealing with investors and creditors will benefit everyone and assist to prevent systemic banking crisis. Most of the crisis and corporate governance issues that have occurred, the scandals, the banks will normally have a bigger role. So if you have, especially in our context in Ghana, we've seen that the banking sector has gone through a lot. Okay, so if you adapt or go by the tenets and the requirements of corporate governance, it will help the entire society, especially investors and creditors, because the banking crisis where people can lose their savings, their investments, will help prevent that. Okay. The nations with more robust corporate governance safeguard for minority shareholders have significantly bigger and more liquid capital markets. Okay, so we just said that investors will be looking at corporate governance standards and making decisions as to whether to invest or not. So in countries or jurisdictions where corporate governance is upheld in such a way that minority and foreign shareholders are protected, these foreign investors who may be more interested in investing in those countries, leading to bigger and more liquid capital markets for those jurisdictions. Okay. Then competition in capital markets, i.e. getting investors, and for product markets, customers, acts as a restraint on business behavior, supporting effective corporate governance in the process. Okay, so because all the stakeholders, one of the requirements of OECD, as we learned earlier, is to get stakeholders involved in corporate governance. Okay, so they can serve as a check on how businesses are managed. Because investors, if you are not managing it well, they will not come and invest in your company. And I just told you much earlier that customers also have the right to boycott your products and services. And all of these decisions from these stakeholders can force management to ensure that the company is operating well or is being managed well. Okay. The other benefit is it leads to reduction in corruption due to transparency and systems that fully disclose accounting and auditing practices, right? So we just spoke about the auditing issue. So because you know that auditors will be coming and you have to present your financial statements, it may reduce the level of corruption that occur in organizations. Okay. Then the benefits of corporate governance to a corporation or a company. One, it can lead creation and enhancement of corporation's competitive advantage, right? If you manage your company well, come up with good products and services, you are truthful to investors, and therefore they will be more willing to invest in your company because you prepare financial statements, you allow for qualified auditors to do whatever audit, then they will be more prepared to invest in your company. So all the benefits of the corporate governance could position a company well to gain additional competitive advantage, okay? Because the stakeholders, key among them, customers will want to buy from you, investors will want to invest in your company, and with that, you can gain some competitive advantage. It enables a company perform efficiently by preventing fraud and malpractices. So it's closely related to the corruption term. Once it requires you to prepare financial statements, and these statements will be audited, then it can prevent fraud and malpractices, and that can help the company to perform well. Okay. Provide protection to shareholders' interest. So the fact that it will not allow you to waste their resources and also help you to perform well means that at the end of the day, the interest of shareholders will be protected. More performance means more money to be shared by way of dividends to shareholders. Okay. It will enhance the valuation of an enterprise. Okay. One of the criteria in determining the value of a company from the perspective of shareholders is not just financial performance, as we just read. It is also about the compliance to corporate governance standards and requirements. So once a company is compliant, then it enhances the valuation of that particular company. Okay. Then finally, it can lead to, it ensures compliance of laws and regulations. Okay, because there are consequences for not doing so, and that will benefit the company or the corporation as well. Okay, any questions on the benefits? Any questions, or we are okay? If we are okay, let's move to next one, mechanisms of corporate governance. All right. So corporate governance mechanisms can take both internal and external forms to mitigate related agency problems in business organizations. Okay, so we have internal and we have external mechanisms of corporate governance. So basically, these are the various structures and systems in place to ensure that companies are properly managed or governed. Okay, so internally, we can use the ownership structure as a means of ensuring proper corporate governance. And I explained this earlier when I think Linda was asking whether it's proper to have owners to be on the directors, to be members of the board or something of that sort. Okay, so you can ensure proper governance through the ownership structure. And I argue that once you have a lot of the majority shareholders or people that own share to be part of the board of directors of the company, they are likely to ensure that management do what is expected of them because they have an interest or a stake in the company. So you can use the ownership structure, especially at the board level, to ensure proper management of a company. Okay, it will diffuse the agency problem and therefore will ensure that the agents operate as it is expected of them. Okay. Then internally, I said we'll always be dealing with board of directors, right? So the board of directors are also an important aspect of ensuring that management do what is expected of them. So we have the board of directors that are there to check management to do what is expected of them. Then internally, we can also use executive compensation. All right. So boards of directors don't just approve any money at all that management is asking for. The amount of bonuses and salaries and whatever should be connected to performance. Okay. So if you do that, then all things being equal, management will be more interested in managing the company well because they know that their compensation or rewards will be connected to the performance of the company, and therefore they will want to manage the company well in order to get good compensation. Okay, so we can also use executive compensation to enhance good corporate governance in organizations. Okay, external, we have rules and regulations, generally laws, to ensure that companies are managed well. Okay, and we have several issues or aspects under the rules and regulations. Part of them could be the audit testing that we've spoken about. Okay, so in most jurisdictions, it's the requirement, corporate governance requirement, that your financial statements need to be audited. So we have unaudited financial statement, but the requirement is to have audited financial statement, and it's part of the rules and regulations. And apart from auditing, we have all manner of rules and regulations when it comes to how companies especially are supposed to be governed and administered. That is why we have a whole act, Companies Act or Companies Code, to regulate and determine how companies are supposed to be operated. Okay, so we have rules and regulations. We have accounting standards. Most of the time, companies and management can use accounting practices as the basis to manipulate financial statements. And the cases reflect that a lot. Okay, so we have international, what is the name? International Accounting Standards. Okay, that is meant to make these things uniform. How to treat depreciation, how to treat bad debts. So you don't on your own either seek to reduce the profit of a company or inflate the profit artificially by how you treat some of these items. Okay, so conforming to accounting standards and practices, laws generally of a particular economy are ways by which to ensure that companies are properly governed. Okay, are we clear with rules and regulations? Okay, so let me finish everything, and probably if you have questions, we will take them. Then we have competitive markets. So we've touched on them already, or some of them already. So we said we have the market for capital, okay, capital market. And we have a market for what again? Product market, all right? We could even have a market for CEOs and so on and so forth. So basically what we're saying is that if you come to the capital market, investors are looking at how companies are properly governed in order to make a decision as to whether to invest in those markets or not. If the governance structures and systems are weak, no astute investor will want to invest in that particular company. Okay, knowing that, then management may be compelled to manage the company well because they want to attract investment from the capital market. Okay, the product market, we've explained that customers are also rational and they won't be buying from companies that are not being governed properly. Not poor management means that all things being equal, the quality of products and services are likely to be poor or bad. Okay, and they have the right to choose to buy from these companies or their competitive offerings. So that decision as to whether to buy or not to buy will also compel management to ensure that the company is being run appropriately. Okay, and that applies to the other markets as well. CO market. CO market is basically like the labor market. Okay, CO, if you don't meet your criteria and standards, they can easily fire you and get a new CEO for the company. Okay, so knowing that the top management team can be fired due to poor performance, that also could encourage them to give up their best when managing a company. So that is that for the competitive markets as an external mechanism to ensure that companies are being managed well. Okay, then we have societal and cultural values. So this is more like the ethical stuff that we've spoken about earlier. You need to know the values of the society within which you are operating, and that if you respect their values, their beliefs, and so on and so forth, that could also enhance the governance of your company. Okay, if you play with those ones, yeah, even though they may not be legal, they can lead to demonstrations and all manner of things and lead to the collapse of the company. So adhering to societal and cultural values is one way by which company are regulated in order to ensure their proper management. Then we have debt financing. So the capital market was more of equity financing, okay? Like people choosing whether to buy shares from the company or not. But debt financing is loans. Okay, so with debt financing, management of the company will be required not just to pay the loan, but also to pay the interest based on the contract or the agreement that was reached. And there's normally more pressure here than equity financing. Equity finance, you only pay dividends as and when the company is profitable. But if it is a debt, whether you make profit or loss, you are supposed by the contract you've entered into to pay back the loan plus the interest. Okay, knowing this, all things being equal, to force the management of the company to give up their best in managing the company. Because if you don't, there will be lawsuits and so on and so forth that you will not want to get your company into. Okay, so we have this to be the internal mechanisms for ensuring that there is proper corporate governance. Then we have this to be the external mechanisms that is there to ensure that companies are properly managed or governed. Okay. But for each of them, there are issues. So the rules and regulations, we said they cover issues like auditors, like the laws of a country, the acts of the industry, the accounting standards, and so on and so forth in the jurisdiction within which you are operating. Okay. Any questions? Any contribution before we move on? Are we fine? Okay.
Yes,
If you're
sir.
right, then we can move on. So let's look at obligation to society. Once you're operating with the tenets of corporate governance as management, you have to know that you have these obligations to society. Okay. So you must see that you must ensure that you have the national interest at heart. It is not just about making money, but as you make money, you need to contribute to the welfare of the nation or the society within which you're operating. So it's very similar to corporate citizenship, right? And here we're talking about paying of taxes, complying with laws and regulations of the society or the nation within which you're operating. So you have that obligation, all right, if you are in management operating in a company that follows the tenets of corporate governance. Then you have to ensure that there is political non-alignment. Okay, so as much as possible, don't become a politician whilst being the management of a particular company. On your board, you may want to have a politician, right? The boards are not known, so to speak, by everybody. But you as management, so you should not be like the CEO and also be an active party member, a politician. Okay, we've seen in Ghana the consequences of doing that. Okay, you can be targeted and your company can get into trouble. So you want to avoid political alignment or ensure political non-alignment because of the consequences that could come with that. Right. Part of the national interest I've explained, ensure there's legal compliance. Your company always obey the laws. Rule of law, obey that. Ensure that there is honest and ethical conduct, similar to ethical behavior. I said this corporate citizenship is like the national interest. Ethical behavior is like being honest and conduct your activities ethically. Social concerns falls to national interests in the domain of national interest and corporate citizenship, not just to make money, but be concerned about the society. You have an obligation to be accountable. If you're a public company, normally you'll be required by law to prepare financial statements and make this statement public. Okay, then timely responsiveness is part of the societal concerns. You need to find a way to respond to the needs of society in a timely manner. Okay, so that is that for obligation to society. Then obligation to investors. If you're a management and you claim to be operating in accordance with corporate governance, you must ensure you maximize shareholder value. Okay, don't waste their resources, don't abuse their resources, don't be corrupt, but take decisions that will maximize the value for shareholders. Then you must promote transparency and ensure there is an informed shareholder participation. So always keep your shareholders informed about key decisions. Okay, key decisions. Then operate with transparency. We've explained these things much earlier. And ensure that there is financial reporting and accurate record keeping. Okay. Then you will have some obligations towards employees. Ensure fair employment practices. Ensure there is equal opportunities as an employer or as management. Encourage whistleblowing. Okay, so encourage the situation where if an employee of the company finds wrongdoing, they can report to appropriate authority or person in order to have that issue investigated. Okay, there should be humane treatment. Don't abuse them. Don't abuse your employees. You should get them involved, participation and empowerment in the decisions and the direction in which the company is going. There should be equity and inclusiveness, almost like fair practices. Then there should be participative and collaborative environment, okay? Then for customers, you want to ensure that your company is providing them with quality products and services, and also products at affordable prices. Then you should ensure that you have unwavering commitment towards customer satisfaction. All right, you do everything that you can to make your customers satisfied. Okay, I think, all right. Then we have managerial obligation. So all of those things will put an obligation on you as a management to operate in accordance with the things that we've said. But as management, you personally, you also have these ones. All right. They are connected to all that you should have done anyway in the earlier discussions I just presented. So protecting companies' assets, you don't have to abuse their assets. You don't have to allow others to abuse the assets. It's your responsibility to protect the assets of your company. You must ensure that you have the right behavior towards government agencies, all right? Those that you have to pay your taxes to, you have to ensure that. Those that there are some laws and regulations that you have to follow, you follow them, all right, in order to ensure, prevent any negative consequences that your company may go through, okay? Then the control of the company need to be done properly. Is related to knowing the difference between direction and management must be distinguished. Whilst you are in charge of the day-to-day management of the company, know that you have board of directors that will have to supervise the way things are done. And there is another external party like auditors that will come and check you as well as the board of directors to ensure that things are being done properly, okay? Then you should manage through consensus. You should be consensus oriented. So always seek approval and the opinion of your board, because we said they have control over you. Most of the time, the way to protect yourself as a manager is to seek board approval. Once you get a board approval and there's a problem, the board now must answer, okay? Or is the board that will be held responsible. But if you don't seek the consent of your board and you always take decisions on your own, when there's trouble, the board will excuse themselves. So it's very, very important to build consensus in decision making. Then gifts and donations. You want to have a policy, and as much as possible, avoid this, okay? Because there is a narrow or a thin line between gifts and donations and bribery, okay? Yes, in some context, maybe you've given a contract to a company or something, anything has gone on, and after the transaction, they have given you a gift, all right? You would say that, oh, that's not a bribe because the transaction was executed before. But it could influence your future decisions when it comes to awarding contracts next time around. So yes, generally you need to have a policy on gifts and donations. And that policy will guide everybody as to when they should accept certain gifts, the amounts and the nature of the gifts you can accept, and so on and so forth, okay? You should know and understand the role and responsibility of corporate board and directors. I think I've explained that when I was talking about the control, okay? You need to know the role of your board of directors and accord them that respect as much as possible, okay? And it's related to this. Direction and management must be understood. So you are responsible as management for the management of the company, but as to the direction, you need to be consulting with the directors because they have to direct the way the company is supposed to go, okay? So that is that with managerial obligations. Okay, any questions so far on the obligations? So we have obligation to society, obligations to investors, employees, customers, then we have managerial obligation. Any questions? Yes, Esther.
Prof, please, where are we going to place under the obligation to employees?
Yep.
Where are we going to place customers abusing employees?
Hey, this is a new angle altogether.
Customers
Yes, I
abuse
understand.
employees. So
Yes. So part of that is to have, but generally, if it is a tort is a legal term. Once you commit a wrong against somebody, right, and they want to take it from the civil perspective, it becomes a tort. So generally, there are laws in a country that will protect everybody, okay, whether it's a customer or whatever. Once you commit a harm against somebody, the person has the right to take up the matter, okay? So if the person comes and is a customer is abusing you and is against certain laws of the land, whether your company has any measures in place or not, you should be able to take the matter. You should be able to take the matter up legally to protect and defend yourself. Is that point?
Okay. Yes, please.
Within our context, it's more of what management should be doing to employees. Okay, the treatment management should be given to employees. But if a customer comes and is abusing an employee, it's just a commitment of a thought. Okay, and you have the right to take it up legally. If there are company policies to address that issue too, I think the company may want to take it up. Okay, Regina, I've seen your hand.
Yeah, please, concerning that, you as individual employee taking that matter, it means you want to in Ghana,
Can you come
customer
again?
abuse you.
Please, can you come again?
On.
Your line is breaking. Can you take it again?
Okay. Okay. What I'm saying is that concerning a customer abusing an employee, and you want to take that matter on as an individual, that means you are signing your exit from that company.
Why? No,
because
it depends.
Since the organization that you are working in, having recognized that no, what this customer did to our employee, we have to protect them. And you as individual, you say, oh, my organization is like concerning my well-being or welfare, they are not interested. So let me take the matter on. It means you are ready to go home, because in Ghana in particular, I've not seen any. Let's say, example, the last time is the Chinese restaurant where that lady was working. Even it's not the customer that abused the employee, it's the employer rather that abused that lady. If it were not be like come to the public domain, that matter would have been buried. A lot of people are getting abused every day in our organization, but nothing is being done. So if you want to take it individually to fight, it means you are ready to go home. In Ghana here.
No. But we can't be teaching or educating people based on the weaknesses in the system, right? So you have to know your right, and I can't. But largely it depends on the extent of the abuse. Okay, there may be some abuses that normally, if they say shouting at you or just being not nice to you and stuff like that, there are things probably that you may not want to push forward by going to court or something of that sort. But if the person leads physical assault and probably causes harm to you, and your company is not willing to take it up, you have the right as a citizen or an individual to protect yourself. Okay? If the company has a policy and they want to compensate you or take the matter up on your behalf, that is well and good. But if your company is seeking to shelve that, you must be empowered enough to be able to take up that matter against that. But it's just like anybody slapping you or hurting you anyway. Forget about the fact that the person is a customer. Once they commit a wrong against you, it is either the company has a structure and system in place to compensate or settle that issue. But if there is no system in place, you are an individual who has rights, okay? And you can take it up. And I can't foresee the reason why that company will want to sack you because you are protecting your right. So we need to distinguish cases where it's just mere rudeness, okay? Like a customer comes, he doesn't speak well to you or something of that sort. You know that kind of behavior. With customer service, yes, you must be tolerant about that. But if the abuse leads to harm, you must seek to protect yourself. And one way that is available is to seek legal redress if your company is not willing to protect you. Justina.
Yes, Prof. Please, I want to add to what she said. You know, in Ghana, they always say the customer is always right.
Yes.
So sometimes even though the employee also have your rights, but once he's a customer and comes to the company and talks anyhow to you, you don't have any right to call that person.
We have to know the difference. Or I didn't get the question right. It is not about a customer talking anyhow to you. I'm visualizing a case where customer actually maltreats you. There is some physical harm done to you by a customer. Or is it that the person just spoke to you rudely? Okay. If they just that one, that you have to swallow it or something of that sort, because really it's a customer and you must find a way to treat the customer well and all that. That is different from where the customer comes to your shop and abuses you in terms of physical abuse. Even if it is oral and the insult is very painful, you have the right to protect yourself. There are two different things, okay? Of seeking to treat or serve your customers well, and also allowing abuse because you have to treat your customers well. They are not the same. Esther.
Okay, so let me give an example. Yesterday, for instance, my school,
yes,
we ran a bus system. So when I got home, my accountant called me that one of the parents, a parent beat up a conductor in the bus. Because the conductor, the bus was moving, about to stop, and the child decided to open the door. So quickly, the conductor beats the child.
Okay.
Like straighten the child. Why do you have to do that? Because you are not the person to open the door. So when the child went home, she told the father the conductor beat her. So the parents, when they turned, the parent just stopped the bus, decided to put the conductor out and beat the conductor. Belt, assault. So instantly, we decided that we have to report this to the police, because you can't just beat up somebody like that. So we went to the police station, went to the hospital, we have to arrest. It was late, actually. So I'm here to follow up the case. We have to, and then instantly we called the parents. He should not bring the child to the school again.
That's all.
Because you can't do this.
Yeah.
You can't just bring your child and then you want to behave anyhow.
So Regina, that is the context I was seeing the question, right? Not like customer coming and you know how they behave when they come to the store.
Prof.
It's different. It's different from this other example that she has given to us. Okay. So you are a conductor, employee of another company, then a parent beats you up. Then you say you want to shut up because you'll be fired. No. And I can't even see how an employer want to sack you because you're seeking to defend yourself against a customer that abused you. Okay. Yes, that should be different from that should be different from the usual rudeness and some coming to just shout and all that. That is quite different. But the example she gave is what I actually visualized when I was answering the question. Okay. All right. So on this note, we are done with lecture 7. We will have to go for a break